Welcome everybody this evening to our all-member meeting on Where Next for the National Education Union. As Mike said, my name is Daniel Cavalier. I'm your National President and very proud to be so. This evening will look like the following. We will go to our General Secretaries to introduce value education, value educators, the main orientation of our union. We're going to show a campaign video that has already had millions of views. And I will also go through with you our Value Education, Value Educators Hub. We're going to hear from our fantastic members and reps, and then we will go into a question and answers. Our profession really has gone above and beyond during this pandemic, providing continuity of education during not only the toughest time for our profession, but also for our children. We know, our parents know, our young people know how hard it's been over the past 2 years, but also how hard it's been not only during a pandemic, but even prior to that, during the past decade of austerity. So we believe as a union, it's time to value education, value educators, and not only secure proper funding, decent pay, a manageable workload and everything else, but we believe that it gives us the opportunity to reclaim education, not only just for educators, but for our children as well. So I am really, really proud to move over to our General Secretaries who will explain some more. Welcome, Mary and Kevin.
Thank you, Daniel, and good evening to everyone on the call. We are really pleased to be here with you this evening, and we are here because we believe that now is the time for the government to show that it values education and values educators. And we want to talk to you this evening, Mary and I, about the thing that you tell us is the single biggest problem you face in your work, and that's excessive workload. Exhausted teachers and lecturers, overworked support staff. Workload is an epidemic in our schools and colleges. And we now have direct evidence that teacher workload is a huge problem in our country that is different to other countries. International evidence from the OECD that tells us that teachers here are treated poorly in comparison with teachers in other countries. They work longer hours. They spend far more time working outside the classroom than teachers in the other advanced economies. Teachers here do not have control over the things that they're experts on: curriculum, pupil assessment, and behavior management. Teachers here are less likely than internationally. They're the least likely to be asked for their professional views. And school leaders here spend more time monitoring their teachers than internationally, rather than working with them to develop approaches to teaching and learning. Teachers here feel done to rather than done with. They feel told to rather than listened to. Now, Mary and I think you'll agree, we think we know why this is. Fundamentally, it's about Ofsted. And we are entering the 30th baleful birthday year of Ofsted. It's its 30th anniversary in May next year. And we say it's time for change. And in Wales, Estyn too, that for too long has been a clone of Ofsted. We need change there as well. And there is other evidence besides that OECD international evidence. There is evidence in the UK from the Skills and Employment Survey that tells us that teachers in England and Wales not only work excessive hours, but also that their work is very intensive. One research finding from that study is startling. Teachers are far more likely than any other profession. This is pre-pandemic, but more likely than any other profession to say that they end the day exhausted. 85% reporting that they are exhausted at the end of every single working day, far higher than any other profession. Now, you already know this stuff. You experience it every day. The lack of respect for your professional knowledge and expertise, the exhaustion at the end of the day, throughout the weekend as well, the sense that you're always being judged, that there's never enough time to do your work properly. So we are saying things must change. because international evidence also tells us that when teachers and lecturers are respected, they experience much greater job satisfaction. And when teaching professionals are happier in their work, pupils learn better, they're happier at school or college, and their welfare, like their teachers' welfare, improves.
Thanks, Kevin. So it's a virtuous circle. And the NEU also believes that the way that politicians hold schools and colleges accountable, that must change. Now, it's Ofsted's 30th birthday next year, and we say that Ofsted must go. We believe that this is a fundamental difference. Ofsted is a fundamental difference between our education system and others where teachers are treated much better. Other countries don't have such top-down policing of their schools. So in the new year, we are launching a major campaign of Ofsted, on Ofsted, and we're seeking that change. And we're setting out our positive alternative to our current system of inspection. And in the run-up to that horrible birthday, we will launch videos, petitions, and letters. And we want to support fundamental change to Estin too. So we will need your support in the new year for that big push. And we also need your support to tackle workload. We want you to reclaim your professionalism at school and at college level, at every school and in every college. So today we are launching Value Education, Value Educators. Now, when we come to address workload, we know that some NEU union groups negotiate with their leadership to reduce excessive elements of accountability that drive up the workload in their schools and colleges. Tomorrow, we are writing to all head teachers and all employers, laying out our position and asking them to respect the contact from our reps. We want to build a movement for change at school and college level, at district and national levels. As Kevin said, we've looked closely at the drivers of excessive and intensive workload. And the Value Education, Value Educators in our Value Educators Workload Accountability Booklet resources gives you, in one place, concrete information on what the NEU and others, including Ofsted and the Department for Education, say about what is required for teachers. There are separate sections for teachers and for support staff. We look at job descriptions, job creep, contractual hours, cover for teachers, and career development entitlements for support staff. And there's a version for Wales. And our post-16 National Council are developing a bespoke version for sixth form and FE colleges that will be available as a download a little later on this term. Each driver of workload, mock inspections, lesson planning, data collection, marking, report writing, PPA time and appraisal and progression policies, each is considered. And for each driver, you have the latest information of what your union says should be done and how this chimes with Ofsted or DfE guidance. Previous work we have done has led to the DfE issuing quite good guidance on planning and marking and data, and it's also issued a reducing workload toolkit, but it hasn't had the effect it needs to have in schools and colleges. It hasn't had the attention it deserves. And we think that although the DfE may have good intentions, those are negated because of the downward pressure on heads from Ofsted and their fear of Ofsted.
So the work that we are launching is intended to provide a countervailing pressure. We want members in every school and college to look at our Value Educators Workload Accountability resource and then agree to take the issues in there to their head or their principal. We want school and college leaders, especially NEU leaders, often at the very sharp end of Ofsted's punitive outcomes, to engage constructively with union groups and lead ethically. Now, we did this last year over COVID safety, over checklists, which we now want to do over workload checklists. Last year, we wrote to all head teachers about the safety checklist. We said our rep would approach them. We asked our reps to meet with members and then go to the head. Now we're doing the same with these workload checklists. We want to share information between schools locally because we know there are differences. So we want people in one school to know that down the road, the head teacher has already stopped doing all mock steads, or reduced the marking load. We want that information shared. And we've got in every district a WhatsApp group of reps that is sharing that information. We want branches to organise briefings for our reps, and our branches will be going ahead with doing that. We think it's really important that you know you have every right as professionals to have a conversation about your workload. It's professional to have those conversations because you know what is a good use of your time and what is not a good use of your time. And if the leaders of your school or college are good leaders, they will want to have those conversations with you. They will want to listen to you and hear what is causing you and your colleagues unnecessary work and how that work could be done better or not done at all, so that you can focus on the core areas of your professional responsibilities, the best way to teach, the best ways for your pupils to learn. So we are asking all our NEU workplace reps to organise a meeting of members, maybe using the PowerPoint resources that we've provided. Then to talk with members about using our workload toolkit again in this document to identify the issues that members in your school want to raise with management and collectively decide to approach the school management about them. To use our model letter to raise those issues with your school leadership team. To feedback, for reps to feedback to members what the leadership team has said and discuss next steps. And then, I mean, hopefully you'll get some movement. But if you want to escalate matters to another level, to then decide to approach your local branch. We have put a link in the chat to the hub of resources that we've got, and Daniel's going to run through them in a little while. We've already said we're sending a letter to every head teacher, to every local authority, to every multi-academy trust. We've also sent information about this to all NEU members. We've shared these materials with the DfE and spoken to civil servants about the work that we're going to do. Let me just say, if you don't have a rep in your workplace, we suggest, Mary and I suggest that you get together with colleagues and you agree to elect one. Volunteer yourself to become the rep at your workplace.
And remember, you can have more than one rep. If you would rather, in some schools and colleges, it's easy to see why you wouldn't want singly to put your head over the parapet. You can have 2 reps. You can have 3 reps, and that means that you can go into meetings jointly to discuss these issues. It can be daunting to go in your own, or a rep can go in with 2 or 3 members in the school or the college who want to come in with you, so that you're not going in alone. You're going in together to discuss these issues. And for the NEU members on the call, we're asking you, with your NEU school group, to hold a meeting called by your rep, or to ask your rep to call a meeting, or to volunteer to become a rep in groups of you and call a meeting. And we want you to discuss workload, including workload on marking in your schools. As Kevin said, we've provided a workload audit in the booklet, and we've provided a checklist to support that discussion. And what we want you to do as a group in those meetings is to identify the 2 or the 3 most important issues raised by your group discussion. The 2 or 3 most important things which are driving excessive workload in your school or your college. And then to discuss these issues with your school leader in a positive and professional manner. And to discuss why those practices create so much workload. To ask the question, do they need to be done at all, or do they need to be done in that particular way? And if they do need to be done, how can they be done better in a way that does not take up too much time, and so that teacher expertise can be better used? And I just want to re-emphasize what Kevin said. Having these discussions is a professional act, because too much of teachers' time is wasted. We can't carry on having working weeks of 60 hours. So it is professional to say, this work is labour intensive. It is not beneficial. It is not helping me become a better teacher or help my pupils learn. And I want to discuss with you, school leader, ways it can be done better. That is professional. That is the essence of professionalism. And we really believe that now is the time for these workload conversations and for us to assert that they are professional conversations. And the reasons we believe now is the time is because COVID has revealed to parents and to the public just how valuable teachers are to children. young people and to our society. And I noticed a comment in the chat, does anyone know how many teachers we're missing? Far too many. The government is really worried about teacher supply, and so are many employers. We know that too many teachers leave the profession burnt out and frustrated. We know that 40% leave within 10 years. We know that a quarter leave within 2 years. That's an appalling wastage rate. And we know that they could have done so much better if they'd been heard. And thirdly, Ofsted is coming under attack from a range of sources, including most recently the Chartered College. And Ofsted says that schools should do no extra preparation for inspection. So we want to hold Ofsted to that, whilst also campaigning for Ofsted to be replaced by a much better inspection system. Now, we know it will not be a simple thing to roll back years of excessive teacher workload, excessive educational workload, but now is the time to restart that fight nationally, mat by mat, local authority by local authority, school by school, college by college. And we will work together, as Kevin said, using technology like WhatsApp groups to share our successes. We believe that many school leaders will welcome these conversations. Many welcomed our safety checklist. Many will welcome our suggestions on workload and will want to be able to say that they've acted on the points that union groups raise, that they will want to learn how to manage workload better in their schools. Ethical readers know the risks of burnout amongst teaching and support staff, as the Teacher TAP survey found just a fortnight ago, when it found out that 3/4 of head teachers have seen a colleague cry since the start of the new academic year. Colleagues, we have to change the situation where head teachers are seeing colleagues cry in schools and in colleges. So now is the time. The NEU is there with you, and let's act together to improve your working lives.
Thank you very much, Kevin and Mary. We are now going to move over to our next bit of the meeting. That we have produced a video surrounding this orientation and campaign. It's already been viewed by 5 million people, so you may well have seen it, but it's well worth us viewing together. So over to you.
She taught me how to grow plants.
He taught me how car engines work.
She showed me how to stay calm under pressure.
She taught me the value of communication.
My favourite thing about Miss Chima is she gives us colouring to do after we do our work. Thank you, Miss Chima.
Thank you for supporting me.
Thank you for inspiring me.
Thank you for giving me confidence.
Thank you for shaping me into the person I am today.
Thank you, Miss, for all your patience.
We all know one
who has helped us grow.
We all know one
who is dedicated to a better future.
We all know one
who has changed our lives.
Teachers and education workers are essential.
They shape the future.
We shape the future.
We all know one
who goes above and beyond
every single day.
Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody. As educators and members, I am now in that stage of my teaching career where I'm bumping into ex-students and their adults, and we are now, you know, we just don't understand. It's immeasurable, the impact that we have and that we make every day in our roles. So absolutely, thank you, and absolutely we need to value education and value educators. We have some resources available for you to use. It's called the Value Education Value Educators Hub. We're going to just go through some of those resources now. Obviously, we've got that fantastic campaign video and a bit more information for you at the top, but there is also a workload guide for you to download. And then obviously that's can be made specific to your workplace. There is also a PowerPoint for you to use through the to have a union group meeting in school. It's really important that you have a collective position on things and things are discussed. If we could scroll down a little bit, please, Mike. Perfect, thank you. There is a model letter for you to use to raise with your school leadership, and there's a letter from Kevin and Mary also below. We will be writing to every employer tomorrow, and then there are some further digital resources. So please do look into the folio. The link I have seen has just been put in the chat, and please use those resources for you to create that dialogue in your workplace and make those changes. It's only small changes that need to be made to make such a big impact on workload. We know that small changes to a marking policy are really, really important. So we are now going to go over to hear our rep's voice. Our first speaker is from Blackburn, and it is Andrew. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much. I just want to start off by telling you about how I started my union career, and I started because of issues myself and other staff members had in my own primary school. I've been at the school for over 10 years at this point and was frustrated by the injustice that I not only witnessed, but was a victim to on a daily basis. I genuinely felt that there was nowhere to go. This was just the way things were in every school. So I contacted my union for support, and the advice line passed me to Sarah Troughton, my predecessor. She encouraged me to become a rep, explaining that rather than waiting for change to happen, I had to become the change that I was waiting for. I signed up to every training course and began listening to some of the organisers who are on this call today. I began to learn about Kelly's theory of mobilisation, and that dissatisfaction at work wasn't the main trigger to collective action, but it was the feeling of injustice, which I knew all too well. After speaking with other NEU members in my school and realising that the issues I had were both widely and deeply felt, I filed a grievance and a whistleblowing complaint and united the workforce. This resulted in positive changes to the working day for all staff, from teachers and teaching assistants to site supervisors. Our school environment transformed overnight, and our SLT now value education and the educators that make it possible. Through our action, the workload in my school is better. There's more emphasis on quality teaching rather than paper exercises, and it all began because of the work of the NEU and because of the work that some of you here on this call carry out every day. Since then, I've been elected through the democratic process to become the Assistant Branch Secretary for Blackburn. Through this role, I've been able to win on workload in other schools alongside Simon Jones, the Branch Secretary. We've met with head teachers and helped them design directed time calendars for their part-time staff, giving them the same opportunities as their full-time colleagues. Through meetings with our local authority, we've been able to send out information to all head teachers explaining what we as a union are aiming to achieve in national campaigns. This has resulted in head teachers calling us for advice. Through mass emails and personalised phone calls, I personally have managed to recruit reps into academy chains who have met with their members to discuss the worries that they have in their own schools. And supporting these reps to lead members' meetings, they've gone on to meet with their head teachers regularly and won on cover and what short-term absence really means, which has eased their workload and their working time. In schools where there's no rep, I've created WhatsApp groups for those members, and now those members receive the same information as our reps. Although there's no rep in their school, they are armed with the same information, and it feels sometimes like there's 10 reps in there rather than none at all. Through members' meetings, we've clarified what teachers are required to do and not required to do under the school teachers' paying conditions. I've helped members in school where there's been no rep to draft letters to the head teachers about the reimbursement of their missed PPA time and what they should be receiving as a part-time member of staff. All of these successes have been down to members, reps and officers at both local and national level to help members regain the professional confidence to shape teaching and learning. And I'll leave you with this quote: individually, we are one drop, but together we're an ocean. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and that was absolutely fantastic organising work and empowering of members that's been going on in Blackburn. Our next speaker is Fender from Redbridge. So welcome, Fender.
Thank you, Daniel. In Redbridge District, we really welcome the Value Education, Value Educators campaign. Why? Well, the pay freeze is a huge insult to all school staff after the commitment we have shown during the past year. I think it has the potential to unite all members as a lightning rod for our anger. But we will need to work hard to build a campaign which will make a national ballot viable. Also, because in our district, we have been busy over the last 5 months with a strike dispute at Oaks Park High School, where the union rep was sacked and union members are being bullied. Bullying culture plagues most of our schools and is a testament to the fact educators are not being valued in our education system. How do we change this? By coming together and creating a mass movement to reclaim education. At the start of this year, as the branch and district secretary, I was contacted by members in 4 different primary schools in Redbridge. In the first 2 schools, the members pushed back and won. In school 1, the head teacher wanted to introduce deep marking twice a week instead of the usual one. Union members were angry because they were told to do this on top of an already unmanageable workload, and they were made to feel guilty, saying it would help children make better progress after the disruption of COVID. The union rep called the branch and we helped her to organise a meeting, think about escalation tactics if the head refused to negotiate, and carry out a survey of members to prove to the head teacher staff were against the change. The rep met with the head teacher, knowing she had the full backing of her union group, and managed to stop the change. In school 2, the head teacher tried to bully out 2 assistant head teachers by slowly eroding their responsibilities and spreading their workload amongst existing staff. The reps contacted the branch and we organised a members' meeting where members agreed to send a collective letter to the head teacher and chair of governors. We don't know if we will be successful in securing the jobs of the assistant head teachers yet, but what we do know is where the head teacher wanted to push out staff members quietly through the back door, the union group have shone a light on the bullying tactics of the head teacher, who is only interested in cutting costs, not staff workload or the quality of education children receive. In schools 3 and 4, it's not a happy story, I'm afraid. These are incidentally academies, and I was contacted by several individuals who are suffering under an unbearable workload. One teacher emailed me and said she was going to resign, and she listed how she had been doing 12-hour days doing schoolwork, and this was no longer sustainable. I organised to meet with both union groups by sending out emails to the members. In one meeting, 1 member turned up, and in the second school meeting, no members turned up. In both of these schools, I can only assume educator after educator leaves and nothing changes and excessive workload goes unchallenged. What is the difference between both sets of schools? School 1 and 2 had union reps. Members felt empowered by their reps to challenge what they saw as wrong. The reps also had good communication with the branch and contacted us to get the support they needed to think tactically about how to organise and to win. Members, reps and branch working in synergy can be a formidable force. Sadly, I think most people on this call will recognise the last 2 schools as exemplifying the experiences of most educators, overworked and just dog-tired. My message as a district and branch secretary is clear. The union is its members. Every union member has a role to play in this mass movement to reclaim education. Our branches and districts cannot achieve anything meaningful without members attending meetings, voting for motions, signing letters, and most importantly, standing up and being reps. It's as simple as that. We don't have to stand by and watch a broken education system fail children and drive out dedicated educators. Let's take the fighting spirit of the Oaks Park strikers into this value education campaign and win.
Thank you very much, Fender. Absolutely. Let's take that spirit of the Oak Park strikers, join their demonstration on the 15th of November. But most importantly, we do not have to be, bystanders in all this. We do have agency and we can organise and we can take control. The Mentee Meter is getting sorted, I believe. There is a new link going into the chat soon. But our next speaker is Steph from Tower Hamlets. So welcome, Steph.
Hi, thank you so much. I started as a workplace rep about 4 years ago, which was at the end of my NQT year at a secondary academy in Tower Hamlets. There wasn't any NEU group in the school, but it hadn't been very active on collective issues for a while at that point. One of the first things that I did was to use the NEU workload survey to find out what teachers' concerns were, We had a couple of key themes coming up, which were behaviour management, assessment and data, among some other minor concerns. We took these to the head teacher, and we also used the NEU workload toolkit to suggest some solutions. It hasn't always been smooth sailing. There's been a lot of back and forth in the years since that meeting, but a huge amount has changed, which has been great. From marking books every 2 weeks with written feedback, we now do 1 or 2 formative tasks per half term, depending on the subject, and there's no written feedback expected in students' books. In terms of behaviour, our system used to be that every teacher had to do their own follow-up. So on any given day, you might have every single teacher in the school staying an extra hour to supervise detentions, but now we have a centralised system that is really effective and has improved workload massively. Behaviour incidents have reduced a lot as well, which has helped with staff well-being and just creating a much better atmosphere in the school. We've changed the way that we submit data. So now we only submit data twice a year. It's a raw score from the summative assessments that students have sat, which replaces some of the other types of assessment that we do. So it's kind of balancing workload. It's spread out across the year. So we're not submitting data for all the year groups at once, which had been an issue in the past. And because it's just that raw score, we're not scrabbling around looking at students' work, trying to come up with a grade that is quite arbitrary and doesn't really mean anything. It's actually producing meaningful data as well. Most recently, we've been kind of quietly asking for this for 4 years since I started. Finally, this year, the school announced that our appraisal process would not be looking at any exam results, and future appraisal cycles would not look at exam results either. There will be no outcomes used as a measure of teacher performance. And from this year, main pay scale teachers do not have to submit any evidence at all for their appraisal. They are trusted to have achieved their objectives if there's not been an issue that's been raised or any concerns raised. And as these changes have come in our workload, teaching and learning has improved, the culture in the school has improved, staff are much more motivated, they have ownership over the work that they're doing. We still work incredibly hard, but our work feels purposeful and impactful in a way that it didn't used to. So it just goes to show that what is good for teacher workload is good for schools as well. It hasn't been easy all the time. The school's a high pressure academy. There's a lot of change, which can be good, like the ones I've discussed, but there's also a lot of changes made without really considering the impact on staff that we've had to fight against. And the support of my district NEU and the district officers has been really crucial in making that happen. Last year, we had a particular low point in our relations with the school over COVID safety measures, but with the help of the branch, we kept giving feedback to senior leadership. We ended up holding an indicative ballot over taking some formal industrial action, and ultimately we were able to kind of reverse some of the decisions that had been made. For example, our break being cut was returned to actually longer than it had been prior to the pandemic, so that was really satisfying. There's been some external factors in the success, like new leaders coming in, but generally I think the pressure that we've applied as an NEU group has made a huge contribution to the positive changes in the school. Even just knowing that there's an NEU rep who is keeping an eye on things, looking at the changes that are being made, the fact that people are talking to each other and that they're going to make their voices known, all of that really has an impact on the decisions that are being made. So my advice would be, if you are concerned about workload, arrange that meeting in your school, become a rep. It doesn't have to be a scary thing. And don't be put off if you're new to teaching, like I was, or new to a school, because you're probably the person who knows more about workload issues than anyone else there. It's a really interesting role as well, workplace rep. You get to learn so much about how schools are managed and the way decisions are made. And the NEU has fantastic people, resources. The support network is amazing, and it's all available for you to help make the changes that you need in your school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steph, for that. I mean, the impact that you've had on colleagues and your children and your entire working environment has been, I mean, it's outstanding, really. Keep please putting in your thoughts on the Mentee Meter. The link is in the chat. Tell us what your workload issues are, and we'll have a view of that next. But next, let's go over to Deb. So welcome, Deb.
Thank you. So at my secondary school in Worcestershire, we're expecting Ofsted at any moment. And one of the results of this is that we've seen a massive increase in workload, specifically for our middle leaders, heads of departments. They've been expected to allocate huge amounts of time to frequent monitoring of the staff in their departments, massive completion of paperwork, which has involved extraction of data as well as analysing data, and then frequent meetings to discuss the results of completing that paperwork. Members in school have described themselves as being exhausted, of being broken, of not wanting to come into school. And also expressed that the data that they're being asked to collect has not been particularly useful to them. It has been very much a box ticking exercise rather than something that's been of value. One or two of them did try and raise this in meetings and did talk about it. There was no action as a result of that. So after several of them had expressed how exhausted they were working all hours at night and at the weekend, I convened a meeting of NEU members who were also heads of departments, so it was sort of a subset rather than a complete union meeting. Other heads of department asked to join that meeting, so heads of department who weren't NEU. And we did allow that because we felt that we would speak from a greater position of strength if there were more people involved. It was a very productive meeting. The heads of department were able to discuss the issues freely amongst themselves rather than in a meeting with SLT members presiding, where they perhaps didn't feel quite so able to express their opinions. So they were able to talk very clearly, and we identified a number of key issues that they felt were contributing to the excessive workload and also were not particularly useful, and also came up with some solutions as to what would be a better way of doing things. I collated those things and sent that to the head, and we followed this up with a meeting with him, myself, and two of the heads of department who came in with me as well. And that was really useful because it wasn't then just me complaining as union rep. It meant that the heads of department were there to express from a greater position of knowledge, because they were the people doing the job, about what the issues actually were. It's been a really positive process. People feel heard now. They didn't feel heard before. That was another comment that came through after people have tried to raise things in SLT meetings. They said they felt listened to but not heard, and now they do feel heard. So we've had a number of improvements made to the process. The data collection is much more realistic now. It's more achievable, it's more useful, and also the head has recognised that our members or any teachers should not be collating data. They should be provided with data which they're then able to analyse, and this is going to happen as well. So that's a massive step forward. I think the success of the action was due to a number of things, really. We had a very clear identification of the issue that we wanted to talk about, and we presented that constructively with suggested solutions, and that then makes it much easier for an agreement to be met. We had solidarity in numbers, and one thing that I think is really important is that in our school we've got historically people have not been very keen to speak up because there have been repercussions to people who have spoken up, and the union has given them a voice. I think they've been able to make their points, the points that they wanted to make through me anonymously, but to still have been heard. And because that's happening, and because now it's starting to be received a bit more favourably, people are more prepared to speak up by themselves without the union as a shield. Next steps for us are to continue the dialogue that we've got going with our head teacher now. We've had more members moving into the union because they've seen that we've been successful, and we've recently appointed a health and safety rep, so that's great, and I'm looking forward to sharing the workload with her. And at the moment our focus is on the directed time calendar. We do have a directed time calendar, which I know in some schools is not provided at all. the first issue of the calendar was directed our time down to the minute, this and pointed out that things do arise, and if you've allocated every time you can't possibly, then and that has changed. So now it doesn't include every time, there is some slack in there. And also, and I feel this is a real achievement, our directed time calendar now includes time that for us to put work online because of the fact that some students aren't able to come to school because of COVID, and so we're putting work online for them. That's an additional task that we haven't had to do prior to the pandemic, and it's good that that's now being recognised as directed time in our calendar. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Deb. And it's really impressive to hear how reps have been working to improve middle leaders' workloads as well. That's really important. Look, I've been always a rep when I've been in school all the time. I think it's an incredibly valuable role to fulfill in the school, and something that we should all take on. I've been absolutely lucky to work with fantastic educators, fantastic union groups, and we've been able to make some changes on the ground and improve the working conditions, which are always our young people's learning conditions. So that is a really important thing to remember. We're going to come back to Mary and Kevin, and we will do some Q&A. Please keep questions coming in the chat, and then we will have a look at the Mentee Meter. So question 1 is from Olivia Salt. What do schools internationally do that we in Britain do not do?
Shall I answer that, Daniel?
Yeah.
So I've been looking at this recently, and I think the one key thing that schools do internationally that is done far less in England, because the international survey I'm talking about only included schools in England. Wales and Northern Ireland and Scotland didn't take part. It's the OECD International Survey on Teaching and Learning. And the evidence is clear that in other high-performing education nations, teachers are much more involved in having professional conversations about the issues which they know the most about. So they're more likely to be asked about their views on the curriculum, on the assessment frameworks and practices, on teaching and learning strategies, on behaviour policies. And the head of education at the OECD, Andrew Schleicher, who's the thinker behind the PISA league tables, he set them up for the OECD. So he's a major figure in education. He said at a recent talk I went to that he gave, why in England are we not involving teachers in the things that they are most expert in? They're most expert in the curriculum and in planning. So if you're not involved in, and if your voice isn't heard about your work, it's more likely that somebody who is less involved, because leaders will do less teaching because they have other important responsibilities. But if they have less involvement, then they're less likely to know just how long it takes to do a different marking policy or a different data policy or a different lesson planning policy. What can seem to be quite a little change, if you're not having to implement it, can become a really big and labor intensive change if you're the person who the change is being done to hasn't been asked for their opinions. And so the international evidence also tells us that leaders in England, and this is self-reported from leaders in England, spend more time monitoring their teachers, monitoring that they're teaching their pupils, properly, than they do spending the time working with their teachers to develop curriculum and assessment and teaching and learning strategies. Teachers in high-performing education nations, such as in Shanghai or in Singapore or Finland, they're much more likely, leaders there, to say, I spend my time working with my teachers to develop curriculum and assessment. Now, I just want to say here, because this can begin to sound like leader bashing, I do not believe for a minute that leaders in England want to spend their time monitoring their teachers in this way. I believe there's a reason why they do that, and that will come up in another question. But I think the reason is Ofsted.
Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you very much indeed. I've got another question here. It's from an anonymous attendee. what is the NEU stance on working weekends and evenings? We shouldn't be doing it, but when do we find the time? I feel I would get, this is what teachers do, from line managers. So working on evenings and weekends, what do we do? And what's the NEU stance?
Well, that's a good question, Daniel. And I think that we've got to answer it by going back to the studies that we've just been talking about. That TALIS study that Mary's just referred to from 2018, which shows that it's not true that teachers do this everywhere. They don't do it in other countries. There is nothing like as much work outside school in other countries. Successful education, advanced economy countries, there is nothing like as much work outside school as in our country. And the UK Skills and Employment Survey shows that teachers in this country are treated worse than other professionals. This is not us saying it. This is a study that has been done every 5 years since 1992. And its conclusion is 85% of teachers reporting themselves exhausted at the end of their working day. That's not at the end of school. They're tired by then. It's, you know, when they finish the stuff they're doing at home, exhausted. And those figures much higher than for other professions. So it's not right. You know, Andrew talked earlier that sometimes it's not, it's the injustice that mobilizes people. And this is a situation that is so unjust that teachers, and by extension, actually, it's support staff as well, they get caught up in it, are treated in this way. So that's the stance. Yes, there is some work at the weekend, and yes, there is some work in the evening, but we've always said teaching's always been a long hours profession, but long hours preparing exciting lessons for your class isn't the same as the unfeasible hours they're asking for now, providing evidence for somebody that doesn't trust you. It's not right. And we are saying that we have to stand up for it. And we know that lots of head teachers understand this now. They've, for a while, some of them were caught up by the Ofsted thing, but there are more and more head teachers actually who are coming to us and saying they want the change. There are multi-academy trusts that are dropping performance related pay or any of the evidence required around it because they know the workload is driving teachers from their schools. So we're at the moment actually where we can say to head teachers, now's the time to make a change on this. And let me just say, being a rep, is one of the most rewarding things you can do. Listen to what Steph and Deb talked about, the achievements they've made. It's dedicated, it's hard work sometimes, but it's so rewarding. We're not looking for people who have to be brave, who have to go and shout at their head or challenge their head. That's not what being a rep is. It's having a meeting of members, going through that the union has sent this document out. It says these workload things aren't required. The union document says that Ofsted and the DFE say some of these things aren't required. So shall we collectively, and I'll go and we'll elect another rep to go along with me and say that we've had a collective discussion and we want to see some change on this. It's not the rep saying, I demand change. It's saying, no, we've had a discussion. We listened to Kevin and Mary on the Zoom call the other night. We want to see, collectively, we want to see some change. That's not, you don't have to be as brave to do that. It's about talking to members and then expressing the views of members to the head teacher, as Mary said, in a professional way. In lots of places, we'll get some change from that, then sharing that with other schools so that other people so that we start to reverse this. Because I think it's right that workload feels like it's become internalized, and we've got to start saying, no, that's ridiculous. It's not like that in other countries. It's not even like that in this country for other professions, and we want to see some change now.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I've got a question here, maybe for Mary, from Nicola Timmis. Is there any evidence at all to suggest that Ofsted has improved education?
Well, Nicola, I'm so glad you asked this question because Ofsted is a particular interest, shall we say, of mine. And I think the first thing to note is that how would you know whether Ofsted has improved education? Because it changes its inspection framework as often as it changes its trousers. So, you know, since 2010, we've had 5 separate inspection frameworks: 2010, 2012, 2014, 2015, and the latest one, which is the biggest change of all, 2019. Now, the reason why Ofsted has changed its framework so often is because it has had to concede that none of the frameworks, it says the 2019 one will do this, but it won't. None of the frameworks have had the right outcomes. And indeed, for its latest inspection framework, it said, you know, the previous ones in 2010, 2012, 2014, 2015, they all focused on data. And do you know what that did? It narrowed the curriculum and it led to teaching to the test. And that doesn't raise standards of education. So now we're going to look at curriculum. The fact that Ofsted doesn't have the resources or the expertise to look at curriculum is perhaps the subject of another call. But actually, the National Audit Office, in its report on Ofsted in 2018, said this, I'm quoting, Ofsted does not know whether its school inspections are having its intended impact to raise standards of education and improve the quality of children and young people's lives. And the reason that Ofsted doesn't know that is because at no point in its 30-year history has Ofsted commissioned an independent research project to look at whether its inspections actually measure the quality of a school's education provision. They've never, ever put their inspection judgments to external validation. For a quality assurance agency, that is remarkable. It's not just validity, it's also reliability. Ofsted have never, ever put to external research validation whether 2 inspection teams inspecting the same school would come up with the same judgment. So the only way that Ofsted can say that we raise standards of education is to say, look at the number of schools who are now marked good, judged to be good. That's much bigger than ever before. But that's completely self-referential. It's Ofsted saying these are our judgments and our judgments are right. So we are saying to Ofsted very clearly, if you're so confident that your inspection system works, put it to the test and do to yourselves what you do to schools and colleges. You know, put yourselves through the same terrible situation that teachers and leaders and support staff are put through when their school is inspected, and get somebody in to inspect you. And let's see whether you are in fact raising the quality of education, and let's see whether your inspection judgments are worth the paper they're written on.
Inspect the inspector, Mary. I do like
Indeed.
that. I do like that very much so. Okay, I think we'll probably have time for 1, maybe 2 more questions. I've got a question here, another anonymous attendee. I think teachers and leaders have become addicted to overworking. A lot is based on checking up on each other. A massive amount of work is ticking boxes to confirm tasks have been done and evidence gathered. How do we break this culture? I am a rep, but get no collective willingness to take action against workload. So maybe that would be up to you, Kevin.
Well, I'm happy to have a go at it, and other people on the call will have answers to this question as well. I think it's true that for some of us, the workload's been there for so long now, and it has been growing, but it's been there for so long, it does feel internalized. I met a member at a meeting in Sefton a few years ago. We were talking about triple marking. We all agreed it was rubbish. Her head teacher said that it was rubbish. The young woman I was talking to was crying because she couldn't keep up with the triple marking. She was going to leave the job, despite the fact that I'd gone to the meeting and talked about the fact that triple marking was bad, that Ofsted now said they didn't need it. Her head teacher was saying that they didn't need it, but she felt that she had to do this work, and if she couldn't keep up with it, she wasn't good at. So something about this has to be consciousness raising as well, that we have to say some of this work that we are doing, it's not there for the children, it's there for accountability. Mary has a story that she tells, but I'm going to tell it now, of a member that she was talking to who had to give 10 pieces of evidence to the senior leadership team during the course of a term. There were lesson seating plans, there were lesson plans, there were, all that sort of stuff. 10 bits of evidence given in, And the feedback that came on those 10 bits of evidence was one smiley face. Now, if that's the feedback you gave to your class, you'd be sacked for it. So that work is meaningless. If we're handing it in and getting no feedback, no discussion, that work has no real value. And now's the time to say, no, we're all tired. We need to stay in the job because our kids need us. We have to cut back on this workload. So some of it is internalized, and we've got to work together to reverse that, sharing successes, getting Steph's successes and Deb's successes and talking about them so we can see that change is happening. That'll encourage people to see their way through it, I think.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Right, we shall move over to the Mentee Meter, and we will see what your key #1 issues are on workload. So it'll show up now. Oh wow, there we go. So marking is #1. We had we met with reps and officers yesterday, and that was their #1 issue as well. Accountability, planning, Ofsted meetings, marking, accountability, planning, they're all often driven by Ofsted, aren't they? So some interesting results. Do you have any comment on those, Mary or Kevin?
It's just interesting that this Mentee Meter really mirrors the one yesterday. And actually, the international research tells us that teachers in England do far more marking than internationally. It takes far too much of their time, and that we've really got to start working on other methods of assessment. But, you know, I was an English teacher, and I did a lot of marking because you do in English, but actually I know it's no good doing marking if you do not talk to the pupil when you're giving them back their work, because they can read what you've marked, but they may not understand it, and they may well take no notice of it. So, you know, the reason we're doing so much marking is not because that's the most effective method of assessment. It's so that when the inspector calls and you do your book scrutiny, the books are marked. That's the issue.
And can I say, Daniel,
yeah,
the stuff that's been reported there by the people on this call, thank you very much for reporting it. Those things are dealt with in this booklet. And there's more in this booklet. There's a section here on workload for support staff. And as we said earlier, there's a document for Wales, and there's a document coming for HE and sixth form colleges as well. So these issues are dealt with in this booklet. You can use this to start to tackle them in your school. So we are asking that from this call that you talk to your rep in your school. If there isn't one, you think about having, you know, about getting some reps, getting 2 reps, getting 3 reps, asking the rep to organize a meeting of members, to use the model PowerPoint, to use the booklets that we've got, then to decide which issues you want to put forward to your head teacher, and then to report back to members what the head teacher says on them. That's the process we want to go through. It's the process we did over COVID safety last year, and it won lots of successes. We'd like you to send successes, to share them in the reps WhatsApp group, but send us successes. Send us successes from HE and from FE and sixth form colleges. Send us successes on support staff workload as well, and email them to winning@neu.org.uk.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Any final word, Mary?
No, just thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being on the call tonight. And we know you're exhausted. We really value your time.
Thank you very much, Mary. And absolutely, as per your comment in the chat, we do have to turn the tide on exhaustion, and we do have to start here. So let's collectivise together in schools around workload, and let's win together. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time this evening. Thank you to Sam Riddle, to all of our speakers, and to Mary and Kevin. But thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.